Hi, everyone, and warm welcome to the 8th episode of the Crack the Code series, organized by Cloud Expo Asia in partnership with GitLab. My name is Brendan O'Leary, and I'm a senior developer evangelist at GitLab. I've spent almost my entire career in software in industries ranging from healthcare to national defense and everywhere in between. I've been at GitLab since 2017, watching the company grow from around 150 people to over 1,300. All in 65 different countries and regions around the world with exactly 0 offices. And in fact, I'm coming to you today from my house, which is on the East Coast of the United States, near Washington, D.C. And I'm very pleased to be joined today by Yuri, Head of Technology, App, and Cloud Platform at National Australia Bank, for an exciting dialogue on how to nurture silo-less DevOps culture in financial services. And so there's a lot to unpack there. It's even tough for me to say it. But before we jump into that discussion, let's go to Yuri and have him share a little bit more about himself and his team and what they're working on. Yuri?
Hello, everyone. First of all, thanks for inviting me. Amazing initiative, Cloud Expo Asia, GitLab. It's really great to have this series, especially at the time when there are no offline conferences. So little bit, I will start by presenting my employer. So I work for NAB. NAB stands for National Australia Bank. It's one of the largest banks in Australia, 30,000 plus employees, more than 9 million customers across Australia, New Zealand, and the rest of the world. So a little bit about me. As Brendan presented me, I'm Yuri Belinki. I'm a head of technology for the team in NAB, which is actually called NEF, NAB Engineering Foundation. It was called App and Cloud Platform before, but we recently renamed it. And I have 20 plus years in technology. My background in software development, I was working for a long time for Microsoft in research and development and in consulting services, and moved to banking industry about 5 years ago. Brandon is a part of GitLab, and GitLab is known to be all remote company, but now we are all, or most of us, are all remote. I'm also working from my home. Yeah, COVID forced us to reconsider work habits, and apparently GitLab was a pioneer in an all remote world. Now many of us are working remotely. So without further ado, I would move to introducing my team and the service my team is responsible for at NAB. So NAB Engineering Foundation is a pretty much a development platform which we provide to internal NAB application development teams. And we are responsible for pretty much supporting services through the whole application development lifecycle. So on the left side of the range, we support services which provide teams with, let's say, the agile development toolset, team workplace, team wiki. We also have this group, which I'm responsible for, also has a team which is accountable for your standard DevOps tools like source code management, artifactory management, different source code scanners. The next part of our ecosystem, I would call it NEF Core. There are 2 teams which are sitting at the core of our engineering foundation. One is our custom-built product, which we called NAB-Serve. And it is a product which we provide for the teams in NAB which need to build microservices. So this product is pretty much a DevOps product. It provides teams with CI and CD. It provides teams with a boilerplate for the application code. It gives teams a complete compliant starting point for them to build microservices. It's also very important as an element which drives uniformity across our application teams. The other part of NEF Core is a team which is called Deputy. It's also our custom build, and in this case, it's a custom build service, not a product. And due to nature of our architecture, which is I would say pretty distributed and allows high level of team self-organization, we still need a single control point between non-production and production. And Deputy is a pretty much a deployment gate, which validates a compliance status of workloads on the path to the production. We presented Deputy 1.5 years at AWS reInvent in Las Vegas, and it was very positively received. Moving forward, there are another team which is part of the development platform is API Gateway, and API Gateway team is sharing the same purpose, so that our application development teams, they don't need to manage their own API gateways. Our internal API gateway we provide as platform as a service to our application development teams. And our external facing gateways, we kind of build internal SaaS offering for our teams. So together with an Upserve API gateway team is removing need for the teams to kind of get engaged into undifferentiated heavy lifting, and they can focus on providing value for the customers. And the last but not least element of NEF is an App Cloud Guild. An App Cloud Guild is another very famous, at least in our region, initiative of NAP. NAP Cloud Guild started, I would say, probably around 3-4 years ago as a personal initiative of a few engineers. And the starting point of NAP Cloud Guild was to make sure that our engineers, they have good level of cloud awareness. We had some KPIs to make sure, to kind of help us to validate the progress, like how many people do we have certified in the private cloud or in the public cloud. But with time, the role and importance of NAP Cloud Guild kind of grew up. It's also now responsible for running bootcamps. And bootcamps is one of the main components for us to make sure that people who are coming new to NAP are productive from day one. It's also responsible for different kind of hackathons, community of practices we are running internally. It's pretty much a technology evangelizing arm of our group. And it's responsible, I would say, for generating excitement among our engineers. It's also supporting very important internal initiatives like Inner Source, which allows us to increase code sharing and knowledge sharing. So that's pretty much all about my team.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Yuri, and you paint a great, wide picture of that team's influence. And it's interesting hearing, all these considerations that you have on your team, and those are the ones that I think every large enterprise, is thinking about and trying to find, how do we provide this kind of experience and tooling to our engineering teams. And of course, a lot of folks are doing that in environments that are more traditional, right? You talked in the beginning about your employer, and they're one of the largest banks in Australia, and they've got lots of history and legacy in that. So could you talk a little bit about, how your team has found, implementing these kinds of things? You talked about serverless, you talked about, an API gateways, platform as a service. These are things that a lot of us in technology may be familiar with, but, how did you find that transformation happening in, what we would typically think of as, a traditional bank, right? How did you find that?
Oh, that's a very good question, Brandon. So I would say when people are talking about, I would say, DevOps transformation, and DevOps transformation is a pretty broad term, right? There are some things we all think about. Like I would start with a triple P, like people, products, and processes, which should help you with DevOps transformation. I would also say, like, we all know that DevOps transformation can be possible only if you have executive level support for the transformation. There is also a big aspect of culture, because when people are asked what DevOps is, and culture comes up very often as one of the answers. And I would say probably about 3-4 years ago, NAP started a big transformational program to modernize our tech and to set up the bank for the future with a lot of executive support. And through these years, this support was very constant and very helpful. I would focus probably more on the low-key technical aspects, or low-key technical enablers of this transformation journey, because there have been quite a lot of talks, and I would say everyone knows what requires on high level to make transformation successful. Still, not all transformations are equally successful. And I was thinking why our transformation, I would dare to say, is quite successful. And I think that's pretty much due to a very important decision made quite early in this transformation program to bet on a public cloud. So why it's important? When I think about DevOps and what makes DevOps a success, and why it's so important, I start to think like what happened before DevOps. And if you think about, let's say, a traditional enterprise, I wouldn't say it's just a bank. It's probably any traditional enterprise. And you think your team needs to deliver a solution. You need to do capacity planning way upfront, and you need to understand what servers do you need. Now you submit a request to the servers, to your provider, whatever it is. And it will take, if you are lucky, maybe a month and a half. If you are less lucky, maybe 6 months to get a server. Still, the key of DevOps transformation is pretty much breaking up a silo between Dev and Ops. How would you break up this silo if life cycle is so different? Life cycle for code change is reasonably quick. Life cycle for infrastructure is extremely slow. And if you don't get to the level of alignment, and also you don't kind of give developers key to infrastructure in a way, right? Mm-hmm. You make infrastructure people more of developers, then this transformation is not going to work. There is also one additional aspect which sometimes is overlooked. I think this pivot to the public cloud, it actually allowed us to generate a lot of excitement in our development community, because developers, by their nature, they like cutting-edge technology. When you're working in a traditional enterprise, you're not that often exposed to the cutting-edge technologies for multiple reasons, multiple good reasons. But with use of a public cloud, you can do more experiments, you can do more proof of concepts, you can show business what's possible much quicker, and all that makes developers to get excited about their job. And excited development community is one of the key factors, from my perspective, for a successful transformation. That's what DevOps is talking about, the culture.
Yeah, I agree. I think that puts it really well. And to that point, it takes kind of everyone being brought in, right? It was interesting for me. You started talking about, executives have to be brought in. Like, obvious, I think that's an obvious truth there. And then you ended with the developer, right? You've got to have the developers buy in as well, right? That excited and energized for this transformation. So that's really insightful. And it paints a really great picture. But maybe I'm interested if there's maybe one or a couple of pitfalls that you might have encountered, right? The kind of less glossy picture, right? Like what pitfalls did you encounter as you were kind of going through this that folks should watch out for?
Absolutely right. There is no such thing as a free lunch. Some things come and some things go. So if I think about pitfalls, and like with IT, all the evolutions were not really revolutions. Like we are coming back to the same set of concepts over and over again, but with a new level of abstraction. And if I think about traditional enterprise, then all the development enablement teams, like my team is a development enablement team, or you can call it a DevOps platform team, they were really centralized. And as developers, you had very little flexibility. You can only write code within this black box. And everything is done through the centralized team where you need to raise service requests, wait for really enormous time, cloud arrive. And all these blockers kind of disappeared, right? Developers got a lot of flexibility. What's the side effect of that? The side effect is in a big organization, a lot of teams are starting to go their own direction. And there are multiple reasons. So first of all, a lot of local leaders have influence and they have different design taste, different design ideas. Some teams are more mature in a particular technology. Some teams are less mature in a particular technology. When we're talking about traditional enterprises, there is also a big influence of the consulting vendors you're working with, because these consulting vendors, they're coming with their own patterns, their own accelerators. And when you look on a large technology organization, a several thousand people technology organization, you would have multiple consulting vendors engaged. So pretty soon you will find your ecosystem, like I would say, really diverse. And diversity is not necessarily a good thing here, because diversity impacts from this perspective. It impacts, first of all, your cost of ownership, right? There is still like a lot of what we call undifferentiated heavy lifting, but generally like same type of tasks. And depends on who is using what technology, these same type of tasks, they need to be done over and over again. There is also an aspect of cross-pollination of your talents and moving people around. Like, for example, we love to use what we call away teams. And away team means that if I need something from a team I'm dependent on, and they might not have capacity to deliver to me, then because it's very important for my team, for my stakeholders, I might be able to kind of send away a part of my team to work in their area, and they will deliver functionality in their area, which my team is dependent on. But with a very diverse environment, it will not be easier, right? Because you come to a completely new set of technology. So some companies they like this approach. Some companies, they don't. And I also think it depends on the cost of this undifferentiated heavy lifting. Being a financial institution, we have quite a lot of controls we need to implement. These controls and governance we need to follow. That's actually reflected in the software we are building. If we are building these controls and governance elements over and over again, that definitely takes time from us to deliver to the customers. So it would be great to do the same things the same way, and all what's different will be handled by the application development teams as they feel fit. So that I would probably say is the greatest pitfall, that this movement, on one side, it kind of eliminates a silo between dev and ops, and on the other side, it creates a silo between different teams. I can give like a couple examples from our life. So, for example, most of our teams are using open source Jenkins as the CI/CD solution. We still have teams which are using enterprise Jenkins from the past, but a few teams was working with the same software vendor and like consulting vendor, and they decided to use GoCD. It's not such a big thing, but it still kind of illustrates why do you need a different CI/CD technology, right? So I'm not arguing what's worse, what's better, but there is no good reason to lose this uniformity. Even when we look, for example, let's talk about AWS and deployment languages which can be used. Some teams decide to use Terraform, which is a great technology. Some other teams decide to use CloudFormation. Someone else decides to go with serverless. That's again something which we were addressing exactly through NAPServe in order to kind of pave the same baseline for everyone, and that all kind of, I would say, standard tasks needs to be solved in the standard way. And people don't even need to think about like, oh, should I use Terraform or should I use CloudFormation? This is the enterprise approach. You don't need to invent a wheel. Here you go. Use your energy to build functionality for the customers.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. It's like, it's balancing that, the uniformity, which has all this value, like you've talked about, not, having a whole bunch of people doing a whole bunch of undifferentiated heavy lifting. With, of course, you want to give your developers the freedom to, get their job done. But again, you want them to get their job done, not the job of evaluating a whole bunch of other tools, right? And ending in this, decision paralysis over, well, if you get, 4 technology people in a room, you could talk, and come up with 7 ideas for different tools to use, right? So yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think the biggest challenge of this new world, so to say, is to how to maintain balance between flexibility on one side and enabling development teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say not repeating the same work over and over again, and like standardization.
Yep. Makes sense. Yeah. And I want to go back to one other thing you mentioned. You talked a little bit about it. I think it's something I think about a lot. You talked about the concept of silos, and obviously, one way to try and break down those silos, you were talking about the away team, having the ability to pick up the technology because it's uniform. Are there any other things that you think about when you get concerned about, you've got a huge technology group, obviously, that both works for you and then, are your customer? How do you think about addressing, the bad silos that could come out of those large number of organizations and teams?
So I would say we probably have a few avenues. Our main touch point for that, probably 2 main touch points. First, we built this DevOps product. And if you are an application team or a service team which needs to build microservice, which is a de facto application development standard or architectural standard for our development teams, then by using this product, you are kind of adopting the enterprise standard. And that solves the silo problem. We also have a very similar concept for our UI development. So that's number 1. Number 2, whenever it's possible, we are looking to abstract the heavy lifting, and that's mainly undifferentiated heavy lifting, which creates the silos. We are looking to abstract it out through use of shared platforms. Like our API gateway is a perfect example. So we have a shared platform. We have a contract with application development teams and shared responsibility model. What can they do? What we are responsible for in this shared platform. So, and all of them are using the same technology. Like we do the same, for example, with our identity management platform. It's not part of my team, but that's generally part of a bigger NAB platform. That's probably, I would say, software technological part of the solution. Another part of the solution sits more on the people/culture perspective. And that's about knowledge sharing. So the way how we do knowledge sharing, we have a very exciting concept, which we call inner source, where we advertise it for our development groups, but they kind of get benefits from sharing their code. And the more this code is used, the better. So we built, I would say, a playground for them and the rules, so they don't need to think about how do you engage stakeholders for your inner source. And inner source sounds like a little bit funny term, but it's pretty much the same approach as a standard open source movement, just limited with our enterprise boundary. And yeah, we use this inner source to propagate the knowledge. Bootcamps, community of practices, that's all contributes to breaking up silos.
Yeah, that's really great.
So yeah, that's pretty much our approach.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that that kind of community of practice, and you said, I think even earlier, internal evangelism, internal developer evangelism. That's I think really critical, and at a certain scale of enterprise, it's the kind of thing you have to do. I think we have time, Yuri, for just one more question here. I'm wondering, maybe if you could spend a little bit talking about some specific challenges that you had, being in the financial services industry, of course, that others either in that industry or in other industries that have, highly regulated environments might be able to learn from your experience there. What thoughts do you have around that?
So that's a very good question. Financial industry, like a few other industries, I would say they have quite serious control and governance requirements around delivering the code. If you and me, Brandon, just built a website for our own little company, then we wouldn't need to go through so many checks and controls, right? The moment you start dealing with people's money and you become an institution of a public trust, then obviously you impose much higher obligations on you. So I think the way how we approached this problem, we always had like control and governance frameworks. They were big, they were heavy. What we did for the cloud, we actually reimagined our governance framework, and we made it simple, still powerful, and what's very important, codified. We call our governance framework CAST, Cloud Adoption Standards and Techniques, which has a number of areas which are called, I believe, perspectives, and there are a number of standards. There is the number of standards within each of the areas. So on top of this simplification, unification of the governance framework was a very big thing in itself. But on top of that, we put this deployment gate, which I was talking about, Deputy. And the thing is that Deputy is kind of evaluate all the workloads with the help of this governance framework. So it's kind of using the same unified lenses And this unification actually helps you to automate. It helps you to also reimagine controls, because many controls, they went through a number of evolutions, right? Let's look on some of the change management controls. So in order to automate these controls, you need to kind of reimagine them. And what we're getting with automation, with DevOps, helps us to do that. All the access level controls, like segregation of duties. In the old world, when we had like a very separate ops and dev function, that was a very clear segregation of duties, right? So someone who is writing code should not be able to deploy this code to production. Someone who is deploying code to production should not be able to write this code. What do we do if production deployment is automated, right? What does it mean for segregation of duties? So that actually helps. That actually helps to maintain the same controls, but I would say with the new and reimagined content, which provide the same or higher. I would actually argue even higher level of certainty for the enterprises and for the regulators, that things will not go wrong. So that's probably the piece of advice which I would give. This cast framework, which I'm talking about, it was also discussed in our reInvent presentation. So if someone wants to have a deeper look into that, you are welcome to look on the old recording. But that would be my main piece of advice. Think about your governance framework and make it as solid as possible and as simple and still powerful as possible.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense, Yuri. And I would agree. I think it can be a stronger sense of governance, a stronger audit for the regulators that need it. Going back to how you started, right? If there's this executive buy-in to the need for a DevOps transformation, right? The buy-in for that as to how we're going to transform our business. It can be an enabler of those things rather than, when you first look at it, like you said, it can seem scary. Wait, we used to have two people. Now we're giving them the same title. Separation of duties. Wait.
Yeah.
It can be scary, but if you actually sit down and look at it and work together, you can actually get to I think I would agree, a more secure place if you're intentional about how you automate the right things and put the right controls in place. So that's really helpful.
You're absolutely right, Brandon. Yeah, these controls, they are not going away because there is a underlying business risk which these controls are addressing. Exactly. They just implemented slightly differently in the new world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Yuri, so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I feel like we could talk all day about this. Really, really appreciate it. And I would definitely also really encourage, I watched the reInvent talk that you mentioned a couple of times. If you folks just Google NAB reInvent, you'll find the video. A lot of really great insight in there as well. And if you're looking for me, you can find me on the internet, on Twitter most of the time. I'm at O'Leary Crew, which is OLEARYCREW. And thank you so much, Yuri, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And have a great rest of your day.